wanted everyone to know this is being live streamed on YouTube and recorded, and will be available on the Pine Plains Zoning and Planning's YouTube channel. Also, Stan Harrison is here, and he is recording also as a private citizen, and he will be publishing his to pineplainsviews.com. And highly recommend you guys check that out anyway, because Stan's got a lot of great videos there. But that is the unofficial recording. The official recording is on our YouTube. All right, obviously we're all here for the Carson Power public hearing. I want to thank everyone for having interest and showing up, and all the letters I've received and the board has received regarding this project, and it's great to see lots of public engagement and participation in our civic duties and processes. All right, so we're going to start off the meeting with a presentation from Carson Power about their project, and then we will switch to the public comment period after that. And this is Andrew Gordon from Carson Power.
All right, hi everybody. Andrew Gordon with Carson Power. Here's my contact information. I'll leave it up for a second if anybody wants to grab it. It's also available on the Pine Plains website and all over our submitted materials. Thank you all for coming. I'm happy to share more details about our project, and there's a lot that goes into these projects. If I don't cover something that you're curious about or want more information on, again, our entire application is publicly available with the Pine Plains Planning Board and on the website. And if you reach out to me, I'm happy to provide additional information on anything that I cover here today.
Andrew, can you just take 2 steps out? There you go, good, right there.
All right.
Thank you.
So we're talking about the Pulvers Corners solar project. So I guess before I dive into specifics on the project and what we're proposing here, I think it's helpful to kind of set the table for why we're talking about a solar project application in Pine Plains today. The reason for that is climate change and New York State's response to climate change. So here's a list of climate change impacts in New York State. This list is probably nothing new to anybody here. I think the evidence is fairly indisputable at this point that the global climate is warming fairly rapidly, and there's certainly negative effects that will be felt in the Hudson Valley in the state of New York from the rising global temperatures. So that is the driver for the solar project, and I'll try and connect the dots here on why. So climate change is largely driven by fossil fuel consumption and the emissions that come off of that generation. So the 2 largest sectors that contribute to CO2 and methane emissions is transportation, so fuel and vehicles, and electric power generation. So that is the fuel that is put into power plants that creates electricity that flows through the grid. So when you turn on the lights or when you charge your electric vehicle, downstream that's likely coming from a natural gas or a coal power plant, which is creating a ton of emissions. So transportation and electric power are the 2 largest sectors, and as you can imagine with the electrification of vehicles, those 2 things go hand in hand. So in order to fight climate change and proactively try and prevent some of the negative consequences that I mentioned on previously, we have to proactively try and electrify both the transportation and the power generation sectors. So that is the goal of this project. So here is New York's energy mix as of October of last year. So you can see the vast majority of electricity generated in New York comes from natural gas-fired power plants. There's a bit that comes from nuclear and hydroelectric. That is great. Those are both renewable sources of energy. The downside, it is incredibly hard to build additional capacity for both hydro and nuclear. It can take up to 10 years to site and permit a nuclear project. I think if we were proposing a nuclear project here today, there'd probably be 10 times as many people in this room. Hydro is incredibly site-specific. There are very few places in the world where you can build hydro facilities. New York has unbelievable hydro resource, but there are already a ton of hydro facilities in existence. So I'm talking about capacity on the St. Lawrence River and Niagara Falls specifically. So the goal of, what New York is trying to do, what the world is trying to do, is move this one down by taking natural gas-fired power plants offline and displacing that power generation with this bottom one, which is non-hydroelectric renewables that will largely be driven by solar and wind coming online. So again, the goal is to bring this bottom bar out in order to bring this top bar down and displace the natural gas-fired electricity generation. So New York State's role in the energy transition, New York has been incredibly proactive in addressing climate change. It has some of the most aggressive renewable energy and zero emissions goals in the country. So in 2019, the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, was signed into law, has a target of 70% zero emissions electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. Those are incredibly ambitious goals, incredibly ambitious goals. So in order to accomplish those goals, New York State is creating market programs to decarbonize the state's electricity resources. So the state is putting out legislation, regulation, they're creating markets in order to incentivize private companies like Carson Power and others to come into the market and create renewable energy resources that will then displace the natural gas-fired power plants to bring that bottom bar up and that top bar back. So that it is a market-driven response and a market-driven approach to solving climate change. So here's a few of the programs that New York is currently rolling out or have existed. The one that our proposed project will participate in is called New York Sun. So this is a community solar program. There's other programs that are there for larger scale projects like the Clean Energy Standard. So this is where big wind farms, offshore wind, or much larger solar projects than we're talking about today. That is how the state is regulating those projects. But today we're talking about what falls under New York Sun. So New York's path to net zero. So here we are now. The original goal for the New York Sun program was 6,000 megawatts of distributed solar. So remember, the project we're talking about today is 10 megawatts. So the original goal was to hit 6,000 by 2025. Last year, the state doubled down. That goal is now 10,000 megawatts by 2030. And that is only in this specific program. The total load in New York State is about 80 gigawatts, right? So there's a tremendous amount of electricity consumption in New York, and there is a ton of work to do in order to get there. So, obviously, let me end that section here. It would be incredible if we could solve the electricity generation problem by putting solar on rooftops and on buildings and on malls and in carports. All of that development is excellent. I am very happy when I drive through Pine Plains and I see so many residents do have rooftop solar, but it is nowhere near the capacity that will be needed for New York to hit its climate goals in order to make a meaningful dent here in the fossil fuel emitting natural gas power plants that create most of the electricity in New York State. So we are Carson Power. We're a small company, we're a small business, we're a team of about 15 people, we're located in New York City. We only operate in New York, and we are incredibly focused on the New York Sun program. I have about 3 years of experience working in New York Sun. I think collectively our team has something closer to 15 or 20 years of experience working in New York Sun. The team has put online over 250 megawatts of these projects in other parts of the state. So this is a relatively new company, but the team itself is incredibly experienced. Oops. Skip one. So we are 100% employee owned, and our goal here, like I said earlier, New York State's response to the climate challenge and the energy transition is market driven. So in New York State, the utilities cannot own the power generation, they can only distribute it. It is all private companies that are actually generating the electricity and selling it into the grid. Right, so our role as a private company is to help enable that transition by developing renewable energy assets that meets the state's criteria. And again, it's a competitive market, right? It is competitive for a reason, in order to deliver the best products to New York residents at the lowest possible price. So Pine Plains' role in the energy transition. So as you can imagine, the big one here is enabling renewable energy resources to come online, right? And that happens in a few ways. One of those would be, smart regulation on solar. So the town board adopted, it was local law number 3 of 2022 on October 10th last year, regulating solar in Pine Plains. So under that law, our proposal would be regulated as a Tier 3 installation, and Tier 3 installations are permitted use in R-zoned parcels. So the 2 parcels that are hosting our project are both zoned R. That is on Pine Plains. So when we were looking for suitable places to site these projects, there's a very long list of things that we're eventually looking for, but here's the short list. So number 1 is accessible solar resource, right? So this project is going to be consuming sunlight and turning it into electricity. You need to have the input. You need to have good access to solar resource, which we do have here. The biggest one that disqualifies, I'd say 99% of parcels in New York, is proximity to very specific grid infrastructure. So a solar plant like this needs to be on a 3-phase line. It needs to be on a 3-phase line within a certain distance to a substation. And the line has to have capacity, and the substation has to have capacity. So you need a confluence of all of those things in order for a project to physically be able to connect to the grid and generate electricity onto the grid. So another one here is responsible siting with minimal impacts to private and public views. So we're very careful when we're siting our projects not to put them in a lot of folks' backyards. I think the better screen, the better it is for us. When we found this project and this property and identified it as a potential area for a project, we were thrilled because of the way it is screened from both public and private views. It is completely wooded. It's highly elevated. There are very, very, very few residences that have higher elevation than our project. It is incredibly well screened. So the last one here is constructability. So that is a list of several things. We're looking at slope. It has to have a relatively low slope so it's constructible with a minimal amount of grading, right? We cannot build over wetlands. We cannot build over critical habitat. So there's a long list of areas that we have to avoid. This is an incredibly clean site and incredibly constructible. So what I mentioned earlier, the largest constraint far and away on where you can site these solar projects is the grid. So I took this from this week. This is updated monthly. So this is Pine Plains. You'll see here the colored lines. They represent those 3-phase distribution lines, which you have to have in order to connect solar to. The pink lines represent 1- and 2-phase lines that physically cannot accommodate solar. So they are disqualified. It is not physically possible to connect a solar project on those lines. The colors here represent hosting capacity. So if you can think of the power lines like pipelines, they can only carry a certain amount of capacity. Everything in orange or red has very little to no capacity remaining, or there's some sort of restriction on the components and they cannot accommodate solar. Everything in blue can. So I understand there might be fear that this is the first large solar project in Pine Plains. All the developers will flood here. The place will be covered in solar panels forever. That is not going to be the case simply by the restrictions of the grid. There are very, very, very few places in Pine Plains where solar can be accommodated. You'll see here, relative to Pine Plains is where we're proposing our project site. We're directly adjacent to the Pulvers Corner substation and 2 blue circuits that can host our project. There are probably 3 or 4 parcels total in Pine Plains that could ever host a project like this. So community solar. So I mentioned New York Sun. That is the state program that our project is participating in. And the way that community solar works is the entire concept behind this is that those who cannot put solar on their roof for whatever reason, whether it's economics or the roof can't handle it, they don't own their home, they don't know how to do it. I think those of you who have put rooftop solar on your home have probably had some sort of nuisance doing so, whether dealing with the construction or dealing with contractors, etc. The entire idea behind community solar is that those who don't have access to rooftop solar can subscribe to this project. So that means when it comes time, if you want to subscribe to the project, you'll submit your utility account. They'll look at how much load you consume annually, and they will match that to the project. So somebody who consumes X amount of energy annually will end up, being allocated a percentage of the solar project. So again, enables those who count on rooftop solar to a renewable energy resource. The generation is allocated depending on how much energy you use, and the credits are applied on a monthly basis to offset your utility bill. I'll talk more about that in a second. So the subscriber management company that will be doing this is a company called Nexamp. They have committed to what you see on the screen. So all Pine Plains residents will be given priority access to subscribe to this project. So there'll be a 90-day exclusivity window where only residents of Pine Plains are allowed to subscribe to the project. On top of that, anybody who subscribes to the project will be receiving a 10% discount on their energy bill monthly. So the way this works is you're subscribing to the project, you have 0.01% of the system that generates this much energy this month. Those credits are then put against your bill, and you pay 90% of that value, right? So the way it works out is on an annual basis, you'll see a 10% discount on your energy bill. That applies to both energy and delivery charges. So I guess last point there, there's zero cost to subscribe, there's zero cost to unsubscribe. It's an incredibly easy process, and I hope that you all have the opportunity to experience that at some point in the future. So, all right, here is a map of all the operating community solar projects in New York. There are hundreds. There will likely be hundreds more. For what I said earlier, there is a 10 gigawatt goal. The average size of one of these is probably 5 to 10 megawatts, like what we're talking about today. They're everywhere. Here's a zoomed in look at all the operating projects in the Hudson Valley. Again, there are quite a few. So here's what we're talking about for our proposal specifically. We're proposing a 10 megawatt alternating current community solar farms. This is actually comprised of two side-by-side 5 megawatt projects, although unless you're the utility, that won't make a difference to you. It is sited on 43 acres for the solar project, but the entire property, so the two parcels combined, is about 171 acres. So we are going to be purchasing the entire property. So the entire 171 acres will be purchased by Carson Power. About 25% of the property will be used for the solar, and the rest is to remain as is. So there's about 33 acres of fields that are currently in ag production. The intent is for those to remain in ag production and remain and appear as they do today. So those are the fields on 199 and Bean River Road that are highly visible. From Bean River and 199, you cannot see up into the fields that we're proposing to use here for our solar project. There is no lighting, right? The system only works during the day. There's no benefit to it at night, so there will be no light pollution. And the expected project life is 25 to 40 years. We do consider these to be non-permanent installations. So when the project is done, it will be fully decommissioned. All of the components will be removed from the ground. The site will be restored to its previous condition, and it can continue to be used for agriculture production when the solar project is long gone. So there's a big difference there between this and a natural gas plant or something like that, where once the site is decommissioned, that's then a brownfield and is rendered fairly useless forever. So here's our site plan. I apologize, it's a bit grainy. It's a big piece of property. It's hard to get totally zoomed in. So just to orient everybody, here's 199. Here's the Pulvers Corner substation. Here is Bean River Road. Here is our system. So there's actually going to be two access roads. The primary access road will be over here on the west. So this is the existing curb cut that exists today to access this field and the fields that are up here. So we're going to use the same road that currently exists, comes back through the woods and up into the project site. There's going to be a secondary curb cut over here, directly adjacent from Prospect Hill. So the reason for that is we have to actually tie into the grid directly adjacent to the Pulvers Corner substation. We need some access in order to install that interconnection and then maintain it. So that installation period will be about 2 to 4 weeks. It'll be manned, so I know that this is a really hairy corner with poor visibility. We're very conscious of that and want to be incredibly careful. And then from that point, this will not be a road, this dark line. This will just be the cables being buried underground. So these can go above ground or underground. We've agreed with the board that these will be trenched. There's an existing road that runs exactly where we're proposing this to go, and we're simply going to trench our cables underneath the existing road to connect the point of interconnection back to the system. So I'm going to zoom in on a few particular pieces here. As you can see, it is fully wooded around the perimeter of the array, except for one spot, which is the southeast corner. So we're very conscious of that. What we're proposing is a row of evergreen plantings on that corner to do our best to screen that particular part of the property so that there is a tree buffer around the entirety of the fence line. So here's a zoom in on, this is included in our plans, which you can access on the website for Pine Plains. So here's that eastern access road that we were discussing. So this is the extent of it. This is Prospect Hill here. So again, the curb cut will be directly across. These poles that are about probably 100, 200 feet off of 199, that is where we will actually be tying into the grid. And then down here, this is where everything goes underground and is then fed back to the rest of the system. So I know there's some concern about, making the curb cut here and the safety. We are working with the Department of Transportation to make sure that we're compliant with whatever standards they hold us to. So whether that be some additional clearing around the corners here to improve line of sight, or mirrors, or a gate, whatever it may be, we will fully comply with whatever DOT's requirements are for an access road at that location. So let me go back here. So that will far and away be the most visible part of our project, will be that access road that you can see off of 199. So down here, again, this is an existing access road. We are proposing a very small bioretention basin down here. The reason for that is, off of 199, this comes uphill fairly steeply to the project area. The gravel road that will be included in the installation is considered an impervious surface, so we have to accommodate for the stormwater runoff in a rain event that might come down to make sure it's not flooding the field or coming onto 199. So what we are proposing there is a small retention basin. It'll look more or less like a small indentation. It'll be plantings in there, so you will not really notice it off the side of the road. It will not be fenced in. We'll have the same seed mix, which is wildflowers and meadow grasses that we're proposing to plant underneath the solar array post-construction. So again, it'll look a lot like this. This is another bioretention image I found online. Again, small indentation. You see these all over the place with wildflowers and meadow grasses growing within it. So something else to touch on is the limits of tree clearing. So a very conservative estimate that we provided to the board is 20 acres of tree clearing within the fence. So this white line here is what our proposed fence line is. So obviously any tree that is within our fence line will need to be cleared. There will have to be some clearing outside the fence line as well. So clearing and trimming. We're going to provide to the board, hopefully this week, an analysis which lays out exactly which trees will have to come down and where. It's highly dependent on the quality of the trees, the height of the trees. If they're in jeopardy of falling and damaging the fence or the system, they'd likely have to be trimmed or cut down. If there's trees that are going to cause some really severe shading on the solar array, those will also have to come down. So that will be in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 acres, and we're going to provide that exact number to the board once we have it. So we are hoping to minimize clearing to the greatest extent. It's expensive for us to clear trees. We want to clear as few trees as possible. So plantings within the fence, I touched on earlier, it's going to be a mix of native meadow grasses and pollinator-friendly wildflowers. So again, this is hard to see, but this is a list of all of the native species that will be planted underneath the array. So post-construction, this will be planted. It'll take within a few months, and ideally in the summer, it would look something like this. This is actually a really great representative image. This will look a lot like what our project would look like if you were to come all the way up to the fence line. And by nature of where this project is sited, if you did that, you would be trespassing. So this is an agricultural-based fence, so it's a bit different than the traditional chain link fence you might see around like the substation or another industrial area. Again, the goal is just to keep people out, not animals. So this is a bit of a wider gap to allow birds, insects, rabbits, whatever, to get through. Again, this is a really nice representative image of what our project might look like, except for the nice bee boxes that somebody put here. Another example with a probably somewhat different pollinator species planted underneath the array. But again, our project, once constructed, will look extremely similar to this. So existing conditions. For the board's request, we went through a series of visual renderings. This is shared online, but I'll go through it here with you as well. So, like I said, the eastern access road right next to the substation will far and away be the most visible part of this project. So this is the image of what it looks like today. This is the image of what it will look like after construction. So no signage on the road, just a gravel access road. You can kind of see back here are some additional utility poles that look a lot like this one. So that is to facilitate the interconnection. And again, it'll look like standard poles that are on the side of the road all over town. So also as we go through these, you can kind of orient yourself up here. So this is on 199 looking south. This is our next one. This is on 199 also looking south. This is that field right here. You can kind of see here. No solar being installed there. It will continue to be used for agriculture. So from 199 you look up, you will not be able to see anything close to the solar array. So post-construction it will look the same. Existing conditions, so here we are a little bit further down 199 and we are looking southwest. So again, this comes uphill a lot. You cannot see the array, so existing conditions, post-construction, they look the same. You cannot see through these woods to see the project. So now we are on Bean River looking southwest. Same thing today. Once the solar is installed, there's no difference. You cannot see through this tree line to see the project. Last one, another one from Bean River looking west, and it's the same story. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I included a lot of them. If you look up here to the left, you can orient yourself or where we are in the array. So the images I just went through are from public access looking up, so trying to see the array. These are from the perimeter of the fence line looking out to see what you can see from the array. So these are from last week. So this is the heart of leaf-off conditions. You can make out the ridge lines through the trees. If you squint really, really hard, maybe you can make out something, but there is very, very limited view shed from the system looking out, and therefore looking in on the system. So again, look here to orient yourself for where we are, and this is the direction that the image is taking. So this is the northeast corner of the array looking west. So northeast corner of the array looking north. Same thing, you can make out the ridge lines, but this forest is pretty dense. I'll also point out here, the limits of our shading and our trimming and cutting outside of the fence line, that 5 to 10 acres, that will primarily be on the south and a little bit to the west or southwest, very little to the north, simply by nature of there is no shading implications of high trees to the north. So again, this is the perimeter of the fence looking north. So west side of the array looking west, southeast corner of the array looking north, southwest corner of the array looking west. Again, ridge line, not much else. Southwest corner of the array looking south. This is the center of the array looking northwest. So this one I will say, if you look here, we are currently proposing some panels to go where these first rows of trees are. So some of these highest trees, that tree line will be reduced, but it should not go below the ridge line from the center point on the array. So some of these immediate trees in front will be cut down, but again, it goes out for a bit before it goes downhill, and we think that that view shed of that ridge line will be maintained. Southwest corner of the eastern array looking south. Southwest corner of the east array looking southeast. Southeast corner of the east array looking east. And then this is the same thing looking south. So here is the east side of the array looking due east. Again, you can see the ridge line. These trees will be preserved, and you cannot see down to Bean River or Tripp Road. It is incredibly well screened. So next slide is going to be this southeast corner where we do have some view shed impacts. So you can make out there's a white home. This is about 1.3 miles from the project site. There's another home you can't see in this image that's over here, which is a little bit over 1.5 miles from the project site.
It's actually 0.98.
Okay, excuse me.
So again, this is the one area where we're going to have substantial visual impacts to those homes that are, simply, this is a really high project site. It's high elevation. It's higher elevation than most of the homes in town. These homes in the southeast corner are higher elevation than us, and that is the nature of it. Okay, so here's the northeast corner of the array looking south, northeast corner of the array looking northwest, north side of the array looking south. So when I mentioned solar resource at the beginning of the presentation, this is what I'm talking about, really good southern exposure to sunlight. This is why we cited the project here, because it's high elevation, again, has great access to solar resource. So north side of the array looking northeast, north side of the array looking north, north side of the array looking north, but now we're over a bit to the left on the corner, and north side of the array looking west. So these are the last two images. Again, so pay attention here, you can see the ridge line. This photo was taken in January in total leaf-off conditions. It is very, very hard. If you squint through, you might be able to see a car coming through down there. You can see the ridge line. This is an image from the exact same spot from October. So not total leaf on, there's some foliage that's fallen off, but again, there's some leaves on the trees, and you can see the difference in what that will look like. So in leaf-off conditions, yes, you can see the ridge line, you can kind of see some shapes if you're looking out from the array. In leaf-on conditions, and some sort of leaf-on conditions, which will be the majority of the year, very, very, very little, if anything, again, except for that southeast corner. So project life cycle, construction period will be 6 to 8 months, that's seasonally dependent. So if we have to go to construction during the winter, that would obviously cause some delays, especially if the ground freezes and the civil work's not yet completed. Construction hours are proposed at 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday. I know for some specifically, loud items such as chipping or anything like that, we're happy to work with the board if they have preferences on limiting those hours to something more restrictive. Operations 25 to 40 year projected project life cycle. It is operated and monitored remotely. Again, so this is not a manned project, so it's built. It is connected to a remote operations center where somebody is monitoring the production of the site 24/7. There is infrequent maintenance visits for preventative maintenance, or if they have to repair something, if the panel needs to be replaced, etc. Mowing 2 to 4 times a year. There's no panel washing, so there's no water resource that's needed on site. There's enough rain in New York, we don't have to worry about that. And then snow removal as needed. Again, this will primarily be the access roads to ensure that there is access to the site in case it's ever needed. Decommissioning. So again, we view this as a temporary installation. It is not intended to be there forever. So a full decommissioning plan is approved and held by the town. I'll say will be approved. We've submitted it to the town. Hopefully approve the decommissioning plan. So again, that lays out exactly how the site can be decommissioned. And this is preparing for a, call it 0.001% chance that for some reason the owner of the project 25 to 40 years from now is not there to actually decommission the site themselves. The town will hold a full plan set for how to take down the site. They will also have a bond that we are posting, which will be held by the town to decommission the project and restore the site, again for that 0.001% chance where the owner of the asset is not there to take it down themselves. Panels and steel will be recycled. So conservation of prime soils, I know this is another hot topic. So the project is fully compliant with New York State's Department of Ag and Markets guidelines for solar energy projects. So the project is in an ag district, although almost the entirety of Pine Plains is considered in an ag district. So what NISDAM is super focused on is preservation of prime soils, which is mineral soil groups 1 through 4. So here's a cut of the property with mineral soil groups 1 through 4 cut on. So aside from the road down here, which already exists, there's about 3 acres of this section which we are going to be using. So we do have to comply with NISDAM's guidelines. That means that when we go to construction, we start moving dirt around in this part of the site. An environmental monitor will be on site to make sure that those soils are preserved and maintained properly per the state's guidelines. So environmental due diligence. Again, this is an incredibly clean project site, clean bill of health. So we send an independent biologist on site to do their own report and see what their findings are. So there were 0 wetlands delineated on the project site. There were some wetlands that were mapped by the National Wetland Inventory. We went and investigated those. They did not exist. And if you look at the topography, it is obvious why they did not exist. They're very high up and there is no downstream water flow. So no wetlands were delineated on site. There was no critical habitat found on site for local threatened or endangered species. So the way this works is we file a report with both the DEC and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They send us back results and they say these are the critical habitat and species that might be in the area. We have to review for those when we go on site. So the species we were looking for here were the Indiana bat, the northern long-eared bat, bog turtles in this area. So there was no wetlands, there was no bog turtle habitat, which needs to be kind of mucky, wet stuff. We did not find any noted habitat for the endangered bats. We do have to comply with seasonal tree clearing restrictions to be careful here. So there's a tree clearing restriction between the end of March and the beginning of November in order to make sure trees are cleared when the bats are not migrating to this area. The biologists are also looking for critical habitat of non-local threatened and endangered species. So beyond the list that U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the DEC is giving us, they're also looking for other threatened and endangered species. None were noted on site. We have to file a report with the State Historical Preservation Office, and there are no sensitive archaeological resources on site. So again, clean bill of health. So project safety, there are no fire-prone components included in this project. I think there were some questions about battery storage. There's no battery storage on this site. There's no lithium-ion batteries. It is just these solar panels. Panel materials are non-hazardous. They're primarily silicon, glass, and metal frame, and the wiring. All components are UL certified, which is the standard in this industry. Site is compliant with the National Fire Protection Association standards. We'll also consult with the fire department to make sure they're comfortable with access to the site. So road width, turnarounds, getting through the fence, all that good stuff. And the fire department will of course have full access in case of emergency. They will have a key to the fence so they can always access if need be. Site is remotely monitored 24/7 by the Remote Operations Center, and we'll have safety signs posted on the fence surrounding the system. So like high voltage, don't enter, phone number to contact somebody if needed, all that good stuff. So this is something critical I want to touch on. We're intending, so the entire area is 171 acres. We're intending to conserve the entirety of the 171 acres. So that includes the 43 acres that will be used for the solar project. So we've been working with Scenic Hudson on a conservation plan for the property. So, part of that deal will be the solar farm will be a permitted use in the deed restriction for its life. Once the solar farm is removed, 25 to 40 years, the end of its life cycle, it will be removed, decommissioned, and at that point, the site would be completely conserved, right? With the only ability to use it for agriculture, as a typical conservation easement goes. So the key here is that we are preserving the visible fields on 199 and Bean River for continued agricultural use. So this entire 171 acres will not be developable in the future for any other use, be that residential or commercial or otherwise. So property taxes, this is one of the big benefits to all the taxing jurisdictions. This is a cutout of an estimate I provided the board a week or two ago, so this should be available online if you want to see the whole thing. The highlights here are, we are going to enter into a pilot agreement with the town, the school, and the county, who are the big line items on the annual tax bill. The tax revenue after the installation of the solar array in comparison to the existing property conditions is a tremendous benefit. So here's our estimate on what a 20-year total would be if the property as is continue to pay property taxes as they're being billed today. So about $343,000. After the installation of the solar array, we will enter into a pilot agreement with the town, the school, and the county for the 43 acres that comprises the solar project. We will continue to pay property taxes as is for the remainder of the property, and we will also be paying an ag exemption rollback for the loss of ag exemption on part of the property. I will put a big asterisk here. This is somewhat subject to discussing the final numbers with the town, school, and county in conversations with the local assessor, but this is our estimate on what the increase in property tax revenue will be on this property versus what it is today. So project benefits, so in a nutshell, local economic stimulus during the construction period. So 6 to 8 month construction period, that's jobs, that's local subcontractors, and that's a lot of folks in town who are spending money and spending time here. Substantial energy cost savings for subscribers, so no cost to sign up. You can see a 10% discount on your monthly energy bill if you participate in the project. Enhanced grid resiliency. There is no power generation in Pine Plains aside from the school project that's actively flowing into the grid. So if you turn on your lights in Pine Plains, that electricity is being imported for somewhere outside of Pine Plains. This would change that. Local electricity generation, a step towards energy independence for Pine Plains. Again, local energy generation. Accessible solar energy for the residents of Pine Plains, so those who cannot do rooftop solar. This makes a clean, renewable source of energy available to you. A 4x increased tax revenue from the property, and the carbon calculator, which is displacement of about 13,000 metric tons of CO2 from fossil fuel generation annually. This is the equivalent emissions from about 1.5 million gallons of gasoline burned annually. So really tremendous step in displacing fossil fuels we talked about in the beginning and the emissions that they create. All right, that's it. Thanks for bearing with me.
Thank you, Andrew. A couple of things before we get into the public comment period. First of all, I want to introduce the board here. My name is Michael Stabile, chairperson. This is Aline Marsh, she's our alternate member. Kate Osowski, regular member. Ethan DiMaria, regular member. Steve Patterson, regular member. Al Blackburn, regular member. It's Vicky Sirocco, that's vice chairperson. Dick Hermans, regular member. And next to Dick is our engineer, that's George Schmidt. And next to him is our attorney, Warren Roplansky. And our other alternate on the end there is Scott Keating. I just wanted to go over just how we got here as far as the solar law, just a little history behind it. You know, solar was not an approved use in the town up into, I think it was like the end of 2018 or 2019, when the town passed a moratorium on solar installation while they worked on the law, but also quickly passed a Pine Plains Unified Solar Permit, would allow people to put solar on their roofs of their homes or businesses. Anything on the ground was not permitted at that time. There was a committee, a solar committee, that had hearings and input from the community, as well as, it was something like 8 or 9 members on it, and worked on drafting the guidelines for a law. Of course, the pandemic interrupted the adoption of the law, and there was many delays, and that's why it only got passed last year. Last year, passing of the law allowed Tier 2, which is any solar generator, if you wanted to have off your roof, ground-mounted solar in your yard, or a business wanted to have it in their yard, for the purpose of powering that property, not selling it back. Besides the 110%, I don't know if anyone has solar, you're allowed to connect to the grid, and Central Hudson will pay you for some of that solar. But any sort of commercial generation of power was not allowed either until this law passed, and which it did last year, and that's what we're talking about here, a Tier 3 community solar installation. Now there's actually another tier higher than this, the super huge utility grade solar projects. Maybe Andrew, you might know, how many megawatts are those usually?
Usually 20 or more.
20 or more. I think there's one going in up in Copeg that the state has taken out of local hands. You basically send a letter saying what you think about it, and they don't even do seeker review or anything, and those can just get slammed in any community in the state. So this is obviously, we want to have control over this process and regulation of these community-based solar, the Tier 3. And that's why and I know Andrew hit on a lot of these, but I just wanted to go through some of the safeguards that we put in place. First of all, we made the lot coverage in order to preserve large parcels and encourage the developers to combine parcels in order to get better lot coverage, in order to, again, reduce the, not necessarily hide, but reduce the chance that it's something people are going to be seeing in their view sheds or along the public roads, etc. There's lots of regulation here. We're, as a board, we are to take into account any sort of lighting on the site, security, fencing, grading, clearing of vegetation, impacts on rural character, farms, farm structures, ridge lines, screened from parks and roads and public spaces. The applicant is to describe a continuing PV photovoltaic maintenance plan and property upkeep. They have to show us how it's impacting agricultural lands and prime soil. The prime soils, that's in our regular code, regardless of solar. Any sort of development on prime soils. Natural vegetation, habitats. Leaving open the property for agricultural uses. Anyway, well, I just wanted to briefly go over that. So you can obviously see that in our code. If you look up our laws online on eCode, you can see those provisions that are in there. Those are some of the things that we will be evaluating for this project. Actually, Warren, do you want to just describe the seeker process briefly, and then
which process?
The seeker process. Like
seeker, yeah. Well, we have to undertake a environmental review of the project pursuant to seeker, the applicant just recently applied for an area variance from the fence from 7 to 8 feet. So when we disseminated for lead agency, we have to notify all involved agencies. This is a type 1 action under seeker of our intent to act as lead agency for the environmental review. We sent it out to all the involved agencies that were identified in the original long-form environmental assessment form. Recently, the applicant has applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for an area variance for the fence. So we had to also notify the Zoning Board of Appeals as an involved agency. You need to provide a 30-day time period in which the involved agencies can respond and determine if they want to act as lead agency. I think we've received from all the involved agencies so far, except for the ZBA, a notification that they defer to the planning boards of Pine Plains, but unfortunately we cannot declare ourselves to be lead agency for the seeker review at this point until the 30-day period for notification to the ZBA has expired. So we expect that that will be done probably at our next meeting. And then the town will undertake as a first step in the action an environmental review by reviewing the environmental impact statement, the comments that we've received thus far, the issues that the planning board and our engineer and other consultants have identified, and determine whether the project will present the potential for one or more significant environmental impacts, which require the preparation of a draft environmental impact statement. If the planning board as lead agency decides that there is no potential for one or more significant environmental impacts, the planning board could then issue what we call a seeker negative declaration, and then we would move on to review of the project itself in accordance with the issues that were identified during the environmental review. So that will have to be done, and that will occur before, as the first step in the review process for this application. If it is determined that a draft environmental impact statement has to be prepared, that's a much more complex process that could take some time. We don't know at this point what the results will be of our initial determination. I don't know, we'll probably discuss starting that At the next meeting or another special meeting, this public hearing will certainly be kept open. No decisions will be made tonight. We can't make any decisions until we finish the environmental review of the project. So we expect that there'll be more opportunity for the public to weigh in both on the environmental impacts of the project and the site-specific issues according to our zoning law. But we haven't scheduled that as yet.
Thank you, Warren. Just the fence is 6 to 7. Right?
Correct.
Just to make sure everyone knows, it's the fence variance they're looking for. We limit 6-foot fences in this town, and they are required by the electrical code to have a 7-foot fence. That's why they're in front of the zoning. Okay, Brian, you would get the microphone ready. We're going to have the people that are going to speak are going to come up over here by the American flag here. And also, second, we'll open the public hearing. Just going to move the camera also to capture you. As I call your name, you'll come up to the microphone area and say your name and address. First person I have on the list here is George Calcanini. But first, actually, before we have to do that, I just want to mention that the letters, obviously anyone can keep submitting letters, and they'll go into the record and be published on our Dropbox, along with all the other ones we've received, and of course circulated to the board. Circulated to the board. I had another point, but I forgot. Okay, so I need a motion to open the public hearing. Oh, right, thank you, Kate. Yes, it's 3 minutes to speak. I will be keeping a timer, and then I will let you know when it's down to 30 seconds. I'll just tap on the table here or something like that, and you'll know you have to wrap up. And we're going to be strict about 3 minutes. There's a lot of people here, a lot of people to hear from. Anything else? Did I forget? I think I said. Yeah, so just come up and mention your name and address. First, can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the public hearing is open. Sorry.
Michael, if I could just add one thing before we start the public comment. It's not the intention of the planning board to enter into a dialogue with the speakers or to answer questions or to have the developer answer questions tonight. All of the questions that are posed by the members of the public who speak today will be reviewed by the planning board and the consultants, and we will respond to those questions as we deem appropriate. So please don't try to get into a dialogue or question and answer with any of the board members or the consultants.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is George Calcanini. I'm an attorney down in Somers, New York. I've been retained by Lori Ames, who's the trustee of a trust that owns a property at 501 Bean River Road, and I've been retained to discuss and advocate for their interests with respect to this. It's a property very close to the subject property. I would like to open with comments about the secret issues, and I believe it is correctly classified as a type 1 because it is a non-agricultural use in an agricultural district, and actually it's also a commercial use in a residential zone. So there's multiple reasons why this should be classified as a type 1. And as a type 1, with the size and the magnitude of this project, I believe it really should require a draft environmental impact statement, not just the short form environmental assessment form. There are a number of impacts. Ironically, the applicant talked about agricultural issues and impacts of climate change. But it's my understanding that all the science is that the increases in global temperatures have actually increased crop production, not decreased it. So that's really not a factor in his favor. On the other hand, taking out 45 acres of property in an agricultural zone is a significant environmental impact. That ties in with the agricultural markets law, which basically imposes a duty on the governmental subdivisions to preserve agricultural lands. This is taking that away. The other issues that now we're talking about your local laws in general, and specifically the newly enacted special use permit law. Types 1 and types 2 are for accessory uses. This is the type 3, which is not really an accessory use. But there's a list of factors that you need to consider. And one of the most significant ones is the visual impact, the visual eyesore that this project will bring to the neighborhood. Although the applicant claims that there is little or no visual impact, it's my understanding that, in fact, the people that are to the east of the project and traveling along Bean River Road will see the project. So as based on that dispute of fact, if you will, I would suggest that the planning board should see to it that there's, as part of the EIS process, a independent site study that can go out and on notice to the neighbors. You know, the entire area where all the arrays are going to be should be marked with something, you know, reflective or visible, and then give the community notice for a couple of days so they can then drive by or look out their windows and see, and then they can report back to this board, yes, I saw it on, you know, Tuesday at, you know, such and such a time. That's an important criteria. Other issues, the applicant or the application indicates that there's steep slopes on the property. Well, steep slopes and coupled with these non-porous panels of 45 acres is going to, is that me?
That's you.
Oh. I have a lot more. I just referred to my letter that I've submitted because I could go on and on.
Next up is Leanne Teemer?
Fremar, yeah.
Fremar, sorry.
Thank you. I just want to apologize in advance. I'm a very nervous public speaker. But I own a property at 381 Skunks, Missouri Road. Some of you visited my property last year and remarked actually on the incredible western views that we have from our property. Our property is less than 1 mile as the crow flies to this property, and our property sits at 1150 on the topo and looks down upon this property. We are very concerned. Bean River Road originates on our property. We're very, very concerned about the wildlife, and it is a protected wetlands. We are concerned about the heat and light pollution that would be created from this development, significant development, as well as the potential impacts it would have to our runoff water, Bean River, and our wells. While I am a general supporter of green energy, I have to say I have really deep concerns about this development for our community, and noted that the people who work at Carson Power live in New York City, but for those of us who live here in Pine Plains and also on Skunks, Missouri Road, this would have a significant impact to our homes, to our vegetation, to our sight lines, to our property values, and we believe to our future generations that live in this community. Thank you.
Next up is it Jackie Elliott?
Hi, I'm also not a good public speaker, so I just like to. Oh, I live at. Oh, sorry. Hi, I live at 501 Bean River Road. I'd just like to agree with the previous speakers and just say that I find it inconceivable that I will not be able to see these panels from where I live. The size of the installation will be bigger than my entire property. And right now I can see the fields and farm, the agricultural production from my property. I would like to have some confirmation, as described before, some kind of, I guess, approximation of what this will look like before we commit to any kind of installation. Anyway, that's.
And next is, Barden?
Bardon.
Barden. Sorry, what is your name, sir?
Bardon.
Barden, okay.
You're close.
You're close.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning.
I'm sorry, your full name and your...
Bardon Gattani, 504 Bean River Road. I think it's worth mentioning that I do due diligence for a living. I actually work in an investment fund. And when you have projects like this that are kind of brought in through deep incentives from the state that have been made very recently, it's important to really consider who the actors are and what their motivations are as they kind of come into these projects, right? And so it's worth mentioning that a company like Carson Power, which is a fundless sponsor, it's a developer that's been around for about a year and a half, maybe, has very little experience as it relates to the actual entity, regardless of where those people spend time beforehand. And promises made for long-term periods, 40 years, 50 years, are very hard to reconcile with the fact that there's actually no longevity in their actual experience as a developer. So it's very important to consider, as a board, who are we getting into bed with? And what are we doing to make sure that there's actual longevity in the project? I won't argue with the environmental impact, I won't argue with the need for renewable energy, but there are many different types of people that you can transact with when you're entering into these types of relationships, and it's very important to know what types of developers they are. Are they buy and hold? Have they actually shown a portfolio that matures? Or are they exiting, as Carson has already done, other projects quickly to bigger buyers, where they can kind of take the liability off their balance sheet and say, hey guys, we're wiping our hands of this, it's someone else's problem now. It's not something that's commonly discussed. Often we talk about environmental impacts and the like, but these are the kind of things that, as a community, we should be protected against. So I really put it to the board to say, guys, let's make sure we know what we're doing, not only from an environmental and a regulatory impact, but purely from a business impact. What are the incentives on all sides? And who are the right partners that we want to work with as we move towards this future? A transformative one, I hope, but one where we can all benefit in the right ways. Thanks, guys.
Okay, next up is, wow. Is it John F.?
John Hart?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for turning out. I think it's a testament to just how concerned we are about
I'm
this.
sorry, can you say your name and address?
I'm sorry, yes. John F. Hart, live at 3813 Route 199, which is almost directly across from the substation. My concerns are how much traffic is going to be generated with materials and people going in and out of the access roads, and what kind of impact that's going to have on the traffic situation there. Also, of course, the property values. With this being right in our yard practically, how much of an impact is that going to make onto our property value? And, I mean, I love the idea of the green energy and all that represents, but do we need to give up our earnings that we may have, potential earnings that we may have had in our property in order to achieve this? My other concern is for the dangerous electromagnetic radiation that can be produced from these energies being produced in the area, and I know that can be a life-threatening issue, and how much of that will be generated and or protecting the public from. Also, the effect of the glare and the heat on our local wildlife, like the birds that fly through the area. I know that in the area over in California and stuff where this has been implemented, that they have had issues with birds being negatively affected by it. I think that's all I have, all my concerns that I have.
Thank you.
I try to come into this with a negative, with a neutral.
Sorry, Betty, where
I'm Betty Peck, 10 Harrington Drive. My mailing address is Millerton. I actually live in Pine Plains.
Oh, you live here?
Pardon?
You live here, you said?
The property is in Pine Plains. The mailing address is, in Millerton. Okay. I'm trying to be neutral about this, but I also want to look at all the aspects. I have heard, and I don't know for sure, that some of the things that make up the panels are not recyclable. And I wonder, I think about the long-term effects. If it's going to be decommissioned, maybe the stuff is going to be taken out of this area, but it's going to be going somewhere. And I'm not against green energy, but I do think that in a lot of cases, some things are being pushed faster than communities or people are able to accommodate. And I wonder, like, you say this is about a 20 or 30 year project. What happens after that? But again, I just kind of like to know all aspects of it, in fact. Thank you.
So I have Pavan and Anna Gattani. Are you guys speaking together, or you want to go one after the other?
I think I'm going to go alone on Pavan Gattani. Good morning, board members. Good morning, everybody who's attending this public meeting.
And your address, sir?
My address is 504 Bean River Road, right at Pulvis Corners. I've been a resident of this community for the last 20 years, and I am not here to debate the pros and cons of this whole project because there are a lot of things which are not mentioned by the gentleman, Mr. Andrew, which are a cause of concern. The problem is that most of these panels are made with toxic substances besides silicone. And there have been issues in terms of recycling them. The main issue is that there is currently only one company in the United States which guarantees to recycle a portion of their manufactured panels. I don't know where these panels are coming from, and I also don't know what kind of bond they have given for decommissioning once the project gets over. The life of these panels, they say, could be 8 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, we don't know. But obviously when the costs go down, the panels get changed because they want to get the maximum output of DC electricity to go back into the grid. So it is kind of a fallacy. They say, okay, we're going to install it, we're going to just leave it. No. These panels are subject to change. They're hazardous. Certain communities in the United States require hazardous permits to handle this kind of setup for transportation, for logistics of moving. And there are other issues which are not shown in terms of the assessment of the whole project. There are issues that they say that we're not going to wash these panels. Well, okay, that's fine, but what happens is when there's a lot of snow on these panels and the snow has to get wiped out, it gets into the soil. There are other issues that we don't know yet. I mean, I've been living on the periphery of that whole area, and I see a lot of times we have thunderstorms, we have electricity, some of the electricity, lightning strikes at trees, there's fire hazards. There's, I know they can mitigate that, we're not here to argue about that, but there are a lot of other concerns as well. The concerns I have is basically the water being polluted from this kind of a project. It is going to affect me as a direct neighbor because obviously the water level is very low. It's only 4.18 feet in some areas. When I have dug holes in my property, I get water within maybe 6 feet. And this is one of the prime concerns besides all the other environmental aspects. And I think the town should consider, besides Carson, what other alternate companies are there who can give us a better deal? I mean, have we looked at other companies which can provide us a better deal for the town, for the community, which can give us better understanding in terms of, you know, how can we, I guess my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Aronstein?
Yeah, I'm going to submit my questions and comments in writing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you already email us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, I'm not sure, it's just like a signature. J, Robert J? Not Robert? No, it's not Robert. Well, who didn't sign their last name? Maybe put like an H with like a squiggly as a J or something. J is the middle initial.
No.
Is that you, sir?
I'll say something anyway. Yeah.
That's the why.
Yes, well, I am
Your name and
Robert
address, sir, please?
Hamilton. It's 260 Tripp Road.
So it's Robert Hamilton?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I lived on that road for 69 years, so I've been there a while. I can see that. I can see the top of the hill from my house, or two houses there. We are also the group that uses the fields for agriculture. So I'm very familiar with the whole thing. I'm somewhere in between what to do with it myself, but I don't know. I knew that a large number of people would show up because it's not, any company isn't going to come into town and just push us out, you know, do what they want to do. I understand that. And I'm happy to see this many people showed up today. And I spoke with Andrew. I spoke to you on the phone. That maybe it's a good thing, but I guess we'll see where it goes. And
my grandson always lives, and also lives next to me, and I'm very aware of what he'll end up with. So, I'm still deciding my vote, but we'll see where it goes. And that's all I had to say.
Okay, James Augustine.
Hey, thank you guys. My name is James Augustine and I reside on 104 Prospect Hill Road. I've been a full-time resident of Pine Plains for the last 25 years. My mother served on the Duchess Land Conservancy and she was a founding member of the steering committee of Pine Plains United. I've also served on the board of the Bard Music Festival and the advisory board of the Duchess Land Conservancy, and I'm a realtor who works full-time in the Hudson Valley. As immediate neighbors, we received a certified letter on the project from Berman on January 17th that was mailed January 12th from Albany. As the public hearing is scheduled today, January 21st, and written replies were requested by Friday, January 20th, it left us very little time to prepare and understand this project. Obviously, there's popular demand in our country right now for the implementation of alternate energy solutions. How and where we construct the new power plants that will facilitate the distribution of clean energy is crucial to the future of our landscape and environment. It's probably no surprise to you all that the majority of my neighbors, both immediate and more distant, do not want this project in its proposed location. There are health risks caused by the equipment, there are hazardous materials, the general disruption, noise pollution, and habitat destruction is significant. The risk of falling property values nearby is also significant, as people do not want to live near large-scale solar plants. If I were in this business, I would look at appropriate sites where the landscape's already been altered, where supermarkets now that are abandoned and parking lots and government centers that aren't used. Why not approach these areas with a creative and responsible solution for renewable energy? I ask you all to please consider these points carefully as you make your decisions that will affect the town in perpetuity. Thank you.
Joan Redmond.
Thank you. I'm Joan Redmond, 134 Johnny Cake Hollow Road, Pine Plains. And my comments are addressed about threatened and endangered species and wetlands. So the applicant conducted as part of their due diligence, a field investigation of 110.4 acres, November 9th, 2021, and that's out of a total of 168.9 acres.
Oh, sorry.
Whoop, I know it's not over yet.
I forgot to reset it.
Okay, so their findings were, part of their findings were the possible existence of endangered and threatened species, which included, this was part of the DEC letter 12/21/21, included the bog turtle, which is an endangered species, the northern long-eared bat, which is a threatened species, and they've been found within 3/4 of a mile and 4 miles, respectively, to the project site. Also, the U.S. Department of the Interior Fish and Wildlife Service dated 12/18/21 also lists the same species. And included in that is the monarch butterfly, which is a candidate species due to be listed in 2024. So it's imperative that, I'm sorry, I'm just shaking. It is imperative that the broad field study throughout the 168.9 acres by certified local biologists be conducted during the relevant seasons, not November, to determine whether the identified species are present. And so I don't run out of time, I'm going to skip over to the wetlands. So the 66.23 acre western parcel features part of a 14.67 acre wetland which spans the neighboring parcel. The National Wetland Inventory described this wetland as a freshwater forested shrub wetland. Characteristics include it was non-tidal wetland dominated by trees, shrubs, persistent emergent grasses, mosses, blah, 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 seasonally flooded, saturated with surface water for extended periods, generally or more than a month during the growing season, but absent by the end of the season in most years. So this was, this particular wetland is cited by the report. However, in the full environmental assessment form, they say there is no wetland. Pine Plains zoning law requires a 100-foot buffer setback around all wetlands. The applicant's proposal shows the solar array located on top of this wetland. This wetland should be off limits to all disturbances. And a further field study during the growing season, not November, when the area is saturated and covered with surface water, needs to be conducted to ascertain if this area also serves as a seasonal vernal pool or pools to salamanders and other aquatic creatures. And that's
Jane?
excuse me.
My name is Jane Waters. I live at 24 Schultz Hill Road. My husband and I used to own a property front down the hill, but that extended along the ridge line almost to the border of where this is. I've walked it many years ago. The area that Joan was referring to, if you go to the Dutchess County parcel access, you can overlay properties with certain things, and I have here the wetland that's of concern. Now this is, you don't see this from the road. There's really a plateau at the top of the property that is where the panels are supposed to be. And this wetland on the county map is showed very clearly. It would require the panels on the western part of the panels to be moved back a bit. And I can give the board a copy of this so they can see what I'm talking about. When I used to walk up there, that area is squishy to the feet. You're not walking through a pond, but it's a bit squishy, and that is particularly in the spring, which of course is when the wood frogs would be there, and the spotted salamanders and other species that are having more trouble these days. We've certainly seen a decrease in our own pond. Basically, I'm very much in favor of solar. I have solar panels on our roof. We built our house in 1983 that we live in now so that there was the exact right exposure for solar to the south. And we love the fact that our electricity bills are much lower than they used to be. And at the end of the year, maybe we owe Central Hudson a little bit. Sometimes they owe us a little bit, but it's made a huge difference with our electricity bills. I am not concerned about any of the visual impacts. I know the area well. I've lived here for years. You will not see, you will see this field, these fields here, but you will not see the area where the panels actually are from Bean River Road at all, or from Prospect Hill Road. So that's basically, I want to speak in support of John's comments, but I am not concerned about pollution or many of the other things that have been raised. Thank you. I'm done. Well, I've spoken at many of these before.
Okay, Carrie Watkins Bates.
This is the wetland.
Hi, my name is Carrie Watkins Bates.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Not quite ready. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Carrie Watkins Bates. I'm with Scenic Hudson. Our address is 85 Civic Center Plaza, Poughkeepsie. Scenic Hudson is a regional nonprofit environmental group founded in 1963 and credited with launching the modern environmental grassroots movement. Today, we're the largest environmental group in the region. And in the face of the newest and ongoing challenges in the region, including the effects of climate change, we remain committed to making the Hudson Valley a great place to live, work, and play for everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to provide input today. The Hudson Valley and New York State stand to be severely impacted by climate change, and the Hudson Valley needs more renewable energy projects, including solar facilities that are responsibly sited. In fact, Scenic Hudson, we hope that the Hudson Valley will serve as a model of how the region can do its part to mitigate against climate change and meet New York State's 70 by 30 renewable energy goals, which are for 70% renewable energy by the year 2030. And to that end, we recently published Clean Energy, Green Communities, a guide to siting renewable energy in the Hudson Valley. A copy can be found on our website. We realize that addressing this issue and meeting the renewable energy goals cannot be accomplished by siting solar facilities only in the most preferred locations. And while Scenic Hudson hopes that priority will be given to solar siting facilities on abandoned industrial sites, parking lots, and rooftops across the valley, some solar facilities will need to be on less disturbed locations, such as the one proposed here. And in doing so, it's important to avoid visual impacts, protect agricultural soils, and avoid impacts to natural resources to the greatest extent possible. This project is well designed to avoid those visual impacts, and we understand that the applicant will be required to use construction methods and facility designs that preserve the agricultural soils, and so when the facility is no longer needed, it can be decommissioned, and the land can again be available for agricultural use. We support any proposed requirements for the construction of maintenance methods that will ensure pollinator-friendly habitat that persists between and around the panels. And as noted in the presentation, we've been in dialogue with Carson Power on this proposal to protect the property with a conservation easement that would allow for the proposed solar use during the life of the facility while ensuring that the majority of the land, including the highly visible portions of the property along Route 199 and Bean River Road, would be permanently set aside for agricultural protection and protection of the woodlands. We're hopeful to ultimately add to an existing assemblage of protected land and farmland in and across Pine Plains in the region and serve as a model of cooperation between responsible and sensitive solar developers and the conservation community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next up is Laura Gonzalez Fierro.
Not here. She's not here.
She left?
Yeah.
Matthew Cacchetti.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Cicchetti. I'm a local resident on 424 Prospect Hill Road. My wife and I grew up in Dutchess County. We have 3 kids. We love the area. It's absolutely beautiful. We're a local farmer as well. I'm also an engineer. We will be seeing this project from our property. We're also one of the properties that is eligible for future solar. We have the capability to have the infrastructure right there, like pointed out on the map, and we can put in 99 acres of solar per the new zoning law. So, you know, you see a small one here, we can double the size of that very easily. We don't want to. We want to keep the farm the way it is, but this is setting a precedent for the future, right? So this board needs to consider that. What's going to be next? What's coming down the pipeline next? There's a lot of environmental impacts here. We could go into very technical details, but it certainly does warrant environmental impact statement to be done to evaluate the wetlands on the property, all the endangered species that do exist there. We look at different things from many perspectives when we review this, but I think this town really needs to look at the financial impacts it has. You've got a large corporation dangling $1 million of tax revenue in front of you. However, when you really deep dive into that, this project would actually have a net negative in the end, and here's why. So you've got a project that's going to give you revenue now, and in the future with a conservation easement, you're not going to have any revenue at all. It's going to be very minimal, so it's going to retract. If you put something in the character of the neighborhood, like a single-family home there, it would be a large property, and this is a wanted property. There's other people who do want to buy it. You would generate the same tax revenue over time, and you would keep the same value for all the adjacent property owners. This project would devalue those properties, and ultimately you would have significant loss in tax revenue. So the future of this town needs to be, thought about, for our children, and we hope that, the board will look at that and really consider this project, not just now, right? Let's slow down, let's take a good look at this, and let's look at all the impacts it's going to have from many different perspectives, and let's make sure that this town is as beautiful as it is now in 25 years for our children and all of our ancestors. Thank you.
Next up is Michael Del Rossi.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michael Del Rossi. I'm at 5 Lakeshore Drive, Ancrumdale, New York, your neighbor. I'm also part of ruralancrum.org. The one thing that's kind of getting to me is the fact that we have this climate change. We need renewable energy now, and we'll need it in the future. However, there's something about it being decommissioned in 25 to 40 years. Are we to believe that we will not need this extra energy in 25 to 40 years? The other question is, and I have solar panels on my roof, and I know that they lose efficiency over the years, and that is usually 10 to 25 years, 30 years, depending upon the panel, and new technologies are coming up all the time. At some point, when the efficiency comes down, will they be refurbishing and putting in new panels? And the other question is come 25 to 40 years, when they're supposed to be decommissioned, will they come back and ask for a renewal on the lease of the land for doing, the same thing, providing solar electricity? I mean, it's important. We all need to worry about what we leave for our children and our grandchildren, but we have to look at these things very carefully as well. Thank you.
Coming up on the last speaker, if anyone wants to speak again, please go see Amanda and sign up on the sheet.
I'd like to say something at some point.
Oh, can you get your name on the sheet, please?
We'll come back here.
Thank you. John Farrell? John, you've changed.
Can everybody hear me without the mic? Okay, good. I'm going to go out like, free with this. All right, so I'm Jim Smith. In complete transparency, I as well live at 521 Trip Road. John has asked me to read a letter of his statements. In addition, the deputy supervisor of the town is supporting Brian and the board, so I just wanted to be completely transparent with who I am. If I read this kind of quickly, John's got a pretty long letter. I'll try to move through and stay within the 3 minutes. Pine Plains.
I think we need you on the mic.
Okay, no worries. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Pine Plains Planning Board from John Farrell, January 20th, 2023. Carson Power application for a Tier 3 solar farm, 454 Bean River Road. I've asked my good neighbor Jim Smith to read this statement at the public hearing in my absence. These comments, for better or worse, are mine, not Jim's. Please don't shoot the messenger. We have a 200-acre farm on Tripp Road, the north field of which is within the 300-foot notice range of the CP project. However, I don't believe the project, if approved, would be visible from my house. Full disclosure, it was my pleasure to serve on this planning board for 10 years and as chairman until 2017. To me, this is a very difficult and complicated application. I know the board is working hard to understand the application, be fair to the applicant, but also to protect the interests of the town and its residents. The tough issues are, 1, dealing with a brand new, bare-bones solar zoning law amendment, and 2, a new technology and its consequences that none of us really understands, and 3, an applicant with no apparent track record in successfully designing, financing, building, operating, and managing this type of facility. I have read the excellent detailed minutes of the board meetings from September through December 2022 and watched the Zoom of the January meeting. My takeaway as a board that is trying to formulate the relevant questions in a matter of first impression and an applicant eager to push through its proposal. What's new? With some unclear urgency to build this project by September 2023. Is it the New York State pause of the New York Sun incentives program at the end of this year? Is it the federal tax credit reduction? I note that our neighboring town of Copake has been trying to figure its solar farm application for almost 5 years. At various meetings, the applicant's representatives have contradicted himself. Height of the fence, number of acres or trees to be clear-cut, and made assertions that need to be independently confirmed. Panels will not be seen from any house or from and roads. Applicant's answer to many questions is, that's the way it's done in the solar industry, as if there is a long history of precedent, and the board should know better. Applicant's discussion of the tax benefits to the town is incomprehensible, at least to me, and has omitted the critical fact that the methodology applicant laid out for the solar project valuations is being challenged in an Article 78 proceeding brought by a number of sister New York State townships, and its implementation is under restraining order issued by the Supreme Court in Albany. All this is to say, my head is spinning. I just don't know how. If I were on the board, I could render an informed and fair decision on this application without much more study and input. Many people in town have very good questions that should be heard and answered before any approval is given. There is no reason this project needs to be acted upon now. I would suggest that the town board consider a moratorium on issuing SUPs on all Tier 3 solar farm applications, just as the town board issued a moratorium a number of years ago concerning NND developments. Done? Okay. A moratorium would give planning board time to make a considered and thoughtful inquiry and establish a rational and fair policy for any Tier 3 application, including useful and necessary conditions for approval.
Jane Eyre.
My name's Jane Eyre at 8108 Route 82. I started to look at this issue of solar panels and wind turbines about when Texas happened, and there seemed to be a lot of conversation about it. I haven't done a deep dive into it, but from what little I have, I think that I have understood there are a lot of issues with solar panels, and especially these huge installations. I also want to say that I'm quite deaf, and so I've missed at least half of what's been said. I just want to read a list of something that I pulled up on the computer today of the cons of solar panels, and I'll just read off that list of 10 things without going into them deeply. Number 1, location and sunlight availability. Number 2, seasonal solar disadvantages. And I think that applies to Texas when you saw that solar panels really were not capable of handling all of the battery power so that they only lasted a few minutes. And there were a lot of deaths, as I recall, because of people freezing to death. Number 3, sunshine is unreliable. I find that it's entirely overcast here much of the time. Number 4, solar panels are inefficient. 5, solar panels cause environmental degradation. I can't prove this, but I would like to work on a panel of people who might want to look into it. 6, solar panel production uses fossil fuels. I think we could get into a discussion of what climate crisis is actually happening and consider that there might be a solar minimum happening, in fact. 7, solar panels create toxic waste. Again, I need to investigate that and do more research. 8, expensive energy storage. Again, the battery situation, what they can and cannot hold and for how long. It needs to be explored. 9, high initial cost. And number 10, solar panels could damage your roof. That has to do with individuals. I think that's an entirely individual choice, but it's something that as an individual you might want to look into as well. If it serves you, fine. If it doesn't, or might not, it's something to consider. I have a lot more questions, and I need to formulate them, so thank you very much.
Send in your questions to email.
I'm not really sure what they are, but predicated on this, I just know that I have a lot more to ask.
Okay, so I just wanted to go over a couple of things at this point. That, no one else wants to speak right now, right? There's a chance to speak again if you want. You can go and see Amanda in the back and sign up. I want, we're not going to get into specific answers right now for certain things, but I do want just a couple of clear up things. First of all, the notice. Notice was sent out in December to the neighboring properties. Then at our last meeting, there was some discussion. We wanted to make sure that the farms were notified. So everything was notified within 500 feet of the property. But because it's an agricultural district, we wanted to make sure all the farms are notified. And that's when that second notice went out in January. So anyone who is within 500 feet as a property owner, it was sent to your address that you have on file with the county. And I already know I spoke to someone who's like, well, I don't live there anymore because their address with the county for their taxes is down in New York City. But he is living up here permanently now, so he didn't see the notice. So, just FYI, you might want to check with the county what address is listed, and that's the address we go by for property records. Then the farms were then notified as a second round in compliance with the agricultural ag district. And I will note that one of the persons that brought that up about the notice, the lack of notice, was at the meeting on the 12th. I will note that. The other thing, notice, site visit. We actually did make a site visit. I don't know if I mentioned that or if you haven't watched the meetings where the board walked the entire perimeter of the parcel and tried to get an idea of the land there and the view sheds, etc. That happened in December, right? December it was? Yeah, I think it was December. What else? The REIT. Actually, I do want Andrew to handle that. Andrew, can you explain again, just if you can get up and explain who's going to own this thing over the next 30, like that whole part of it?
Sure. So we're Carson Power. We're the new venture, right, founded by quite a few folks who have a lot of experience in the industry. So this is one of our initial projects, our initial portfolio of projects, so we're excited about that. So there are two other companies that we're working with on this project, so we're the driver here, but there's others who are involved. So one of those companies is called Sola REIT, S-O-L-A-R-E-I-T. So they are a REIT. Their mandate is to invest in the property underneath of solar arrays. So there's some financing advantages because they are a REIT and they buy property instead of power plants. So they are a partner that we're working with on this project. They will ultimately be the owner of the entire 171 acres. So that is the involvement with them. There is a third party, a company called Nexamp, N-E-X-A-M-P. So this is somewhat of a co-development with them, although they are largely in the background. The reason we work with them is because they have a lot of capabilities that we, as a small business, do not. So they have a construction division, they have an operations division, and they also manage the subscriber management. So when folks decide to subscribe to the project and they want to be allocated a portion of the energy that's being produced from the system, they can work with the subscriber team from Nexamp. So they're a great partner for us as a small business. Nexamp, I believe, is based in Boston, although they have offices in New York. They're one of the largest owner-operators of these plants in the Northeast. They have quite a few in the Hudson Valley. They have projects all over New York. So they are deeply experienced. They are involved here with us as well, although we are certainly the driver.
All right. And a REIT is a real
estate investment trust. Yeah.
And is there any batteries involved in this?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Warren, can you please inform the people about the lack of precedent setting in regards to any actions by?
Well, traditionally in zoning, we don't really have precedents. Each project is considered on its own merits. The fact that one project of a certain type was approved doesn't mean that another project must be approved, or that approving one project will necessarily generate a lot of other projects which need to be approved by the town. There is a small exception to that if the properties and the projects are almost virtually identical. There could be some issue about precedent-setting value, which applicants have argued. But the fact that this, if it is approved, will establish a precedent for other applications isn't really true. Each application would be considered on its own merit. There'd be no reason why you couldn't approve this project and turn down another project in the nearby area just because this was approved. So it's a little complicated, the law and precedents in zoning, but it doesn't. It's a bit of a fallacy.
Thank you. George, can you inform us about how, like, your relationship with going over the information in the project and, I guess, the experts that they put forth or reports that they would put forth, like the person that went and looked at the wetlands and et cetera?
Sure. So I'm an engineer representing the town. I'm with CPL. So we are a multidiscipline firm, engineers, architects, planners, surveyors, environmental specialists.
Excuse me, out of the back, please, so we can't hear, we have no microphone.
So Carson Power has retained Bergman Associates, again, another multidiscipline engineering design firm. And they've prepared the engineering plans. I've reviewed the engineering plans. Again, this is an ongoing process, and we continue to review on the technical side of things. They hired third-party environmental specialists that did go out and did look for the endangered and threatened animals and plants and wetlands as per the DEC and the federal agencies. They did not find those there. They did submit a report. I have not, as of yet, taken an individual site walk of the site, but again, I will be doing that, especially in light of the public comments, just to make sure that, again, nothing was missed inadvertently. But again, everything is being independently reviewed on behalf of the planning board by, again, specialists in engineering and environmental. sciences, et cetera. So it's not simply the applicant submits information and the board just, takes it at face value or believes that everything is reviewed, scrutinized, and independently verified, revised as necessary.
And so the DEC, say, for instance, would take into account what they say and your just confirmation of it, and then that's good enough for them.
Right, so this is, again, as part of the secret process especially, we're circulating, so the DEC's been notified, they're aware of the project. They have the chance to have input as well. I don't believe there were any DEC wetlands identified on the property, so there's probably not going to be a DEC component. But I mean, in other projects that I've seen, numerous other solar projects, just so everyone's aware, the presence of a wetland doesn't stop the project. They don't even have to move the panels off of the wetland. They just can't use certain types of construction methodologies or foundations for those panels. So they actually can put panels right across the wetland, and the Army Corps and the DC will permit that.
Right, so what about that? So they end up coming out and inspecting it, and
They come out
say,
and-
oh yeah, it's okay to do this, or is that?
Right, so again, they would, instead of just using normal, let's say, aggressive equipment that tears up the ground, they may have to put mats down in the wetland and drive across it, and instead of putting certain foundations, like let's say concrete foundation, which I don't think they're proposing anyway, they would just use screw piles or a driven foundation into the wetland area, mount the panel. Again, it requires a permit, but it is, the DEC and the Army Corps do permit. The government is looking to try and get as much solar in as possible. We will verify whether those wetlands are there or not, but again, at the end of the day, even if it is there, it doesn't mean they need to move panels.
Andrew, I had a question. As far as the bee, you saw this picture of the bee thing. Is that something that you guys might end up doing, or offer to somebody who's a beekeeper to use the?
Yeah, if somebody's a beekeeper and they're interested, I'm happy to have a conversation.
So I'm going to open up to the rest of the board now. Who has any questions for Andrew or the experts that want to make a statement or whatever?
You had previously said you didn't intend on planting trees, but you now say you're planting trees on the southeast corner, potentially to buffer sight lines, especially to the houses to the east, correct?
Correct.
So we need a list of the trees you intend on planting, and it needs to be a variety of trees. That's a big thing for me, because if you go in and plant one type of tree, and then you get some type of beetle or virus, it kills all the trees. It gets rid of exactly what you intended on doing. So biodiversity in your plantings for anything that you intend on putting there. You did it very well with the wildflower mix, but if you plan on putting anything else in, we need a list.
Sure, and I'll note that that was a revision, and the tree plantings there were on our initial layout, and we heard the planning board's concerns that there was potential visual impact in that particular area, so we added that piece to our proposal, and we certainly revised the proposed species that will be planted there. Not a problem.
Do you have any response to there's multiple letters, and some people today talked about the panels and perhaps some toxicity to the water underneath from melting snow or replacing the panels?
Yeah, so the toxic materials in the panels, that's not something I'm really familiar with. I don't believe that's to be the case, and I'll try and send some materials to the board to review. But yeah, they're primarily silicon. I know that historically there's been other panel manufacturers. I think they've used like cadmium telluride or some other hazardous material in the soldering of so not actually the material of the panel, but the soldering that puts it together. That would not be in anything that we produce. I don't even think those panels are available. So.
Where are the panels coming from? Okay, so no dialogue. Thank you. That said, maybe you could, that is a question I actually had. Where are they sourced from, China or what?
Yeah, so almost all the panel manufacturing is done in China or Southeast Asian countries. Again, that's a huge change that's coming to the United States, right? It's a huge growing industry, and there's been an emphasis in the federal level to incentivize domestic manufacturing so we can stop buying solar panels from overseas. So,
Is there any effort in your supply chain to make sure non-slave labor working on it, like from Shenzhen?
yes, absolutely. I can provide some more content to you guys on what that is.
What's
I would like to hear from the other board members, please. I think we need to be informed.
okay? The board members have an opportunity to ask questions. Okay. All right. It's everyone. You want us to talk again? You can sign up
Well,
again.
3 minutes was too less. I'm sorry.
Well, that's the standard for the state.
And you can submit your comments and we go over them and have them on discussions at our meetings.
Yes, Helen.
Andrew, you submitted as part of the application a letter from CPY, which was the environmental due diligence summary.
Yes.
And it refers to the field investigation which we know was done in November. I'm wondering, would it be possible for you to submit the reports that were actually produced by the biologists who did that field assessment?
Yep, absolutely. I'll request that from CPNY and forward that to them.
And do you know how many biologists were involved?
Usually they work in tandem. I'm not sure how many days they spent on site. I'll have to request their notes.
So all of that information, the number of biologists, the amount of time they spent, and also an explanation of why only 110 acres was surveyed and not the whole property would be great.
Sure, I'll request so they usually just send us the final report. Again, they're an independent firm and they have independent licenses, so that's their name they're putting on the paper there. But I'll request field notes and details about the site visit and I can provide that to the board.
Anyone over there? Oh, Dick. Yes.
I had a question. Is the purchase of the property contingent on your getting approval?
So it's not contingent. It's a purchase option is the structure of the contract. So we have the option to execute our rights to purchase the property at Carson's discretion. So it's not a contingency. There's no trigger. It's discretional.
Could you provide us with an overlay of the cornfields that are in the site, in the array site?
Yeah.
With the array, so get a sense of how much. I mean, there's somebody said earlier on that there was 40 acres of agricultural land going to be taken out of commission.
Yes.
And it's actually about half that, I believe.
I think the number is 26. But I can confirm that and send it to you.
I mean, about half that property, half the part that's going to be, that is proposed, is a cornfield that when we were up there in December, was pretty much nothing growing on it. I mean, and the heavy, I'm sure there's been some runoff from that this year for sure, with all the rain this winter. And that's just factoring in. I mean, we have gotten a lot of letters the last week with this, and in terms of coming to grips with what all your concerns are, is something that we're going to be working on between now and our next meeting. And that's when you're going to really hear more about what we are feeling about it and what direction we think this might be going in.
And we've heard from Ag and Markets. They have a letter that's in the record talking about, they did an analysis of the soils in those areas, and there's just that one little piece of the prime soils on the west side, and most of it is not considered part of the mineral soil groups 1 through 4. It's like soils of statewide importance or whatever, but those are lesser than the mineral soil group 1 through 4 soils. So they did a whole analysis and gave us this chart. I actually spoke to the person, and they're basically not concerned about it from their viewpoint. They also confirmed that it's not subject to the mitigation fund payment, that if this project had mineral soil groups 1 through 4 and was more than 30 acres, they'd have to have a mitigation fund for the community, and that this is not subject to that. Anyway, everyone else?
Could you send us that, or is that Central Hudson map available on there somewhere? That
Yep.
one that had, I don't understand it.
The hosting capacity?
Yeah, so in the PowerPoint, I left links on the bottom to where I pulled all the data from. So if you copy that link, it'll take you to the website. You can see it. Yeah.
Oh, and we're going to circulate this PowerPoint. We're also going to put it in the Dropbox. We're going to put it on. Please silence the phone. We're going to put it Dropbox website. We have a Facebook page, Pine Plains Planning and Zoning Board Facebook page, and we'll post the links to the Dropbox there. And anyone else have? Go ahead. Oh, Warren.
Yeah, do you have the PowerPoint that's been provided to the town?
I think
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
the last version he's going to send.
Okay, one thing I would request, I noticed on the photographs, there's no, you orally indicated what each photograph depicts, but it's not on the PowerPoint. Can you amend the PowerPoint so each one of those visual impact photo points describe what you're showing in the photograph?
Sure. I think I had something on the top there that I was reading off as I went back.
Yeah, just make sure that when we look at it, the planning board looks at it more carefully, we know what we're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah, so I have also a question related to herbicide usage on the project, and in the environmental assessment form, it says the box is ticked that there's no pesticide usage, and that includes herbicides. But then if you look at the operations and maintenance document with Nexam, it refers to potentially using herbicides for weed control. So I was wondering if you could provide some clarification on that.
Yeah, I think the intent is not to use any herbicides, so let me confirm that with Nexamp, and we'll revise the operations manual. Good catch.
Andrew, I also have another question. When you think about the carbon emissions saved as a result of solar, I wonder if you would also be able to include some information related to the fact that the amount of forest land that you're taking down, which therefore is reducing the carbon sequestration. I wonder if you could show a net calculation of the overall impact of of taking down that forest from a carbon emission standpoint.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.
And is any change in the plan for the wood, or are you guys still working on that?
Still working on that, yeah.
Anyone over there? No? Over here, any more comments, questions?
You mentioned you might be chipping on site. I would possibly reconsider that given the nitrogen imbalance.
Sure.
Just a thought.
Yeah, so I think, we talked about this at the last meeting, and I promised the board I would send a tree disposal plan for what we'll be doing with the trees on site. So I think we actually have some flexibility on how the disposal goes. I think there was some other indication that it was preferred that everything remained on site. We're happy to chip off site as well, so I think we're flexible on what the board prefers. So.
Can you also talk on traffic real quickly, that you moved the original egress or the main egress onto the property, because traffic was mentioned in 6 comments here and in multiple letters. Somebody asked if we could have the miles per hour changed. That's a state issue, that's not their issue. But that you alluded to that intersection being horrible, right by the power plant across your Prospect Hill Road extension, which is where your original egress was, but you have since changed that, correct?
Correct. So the original egress, it would have been that eastern access road, so it's now a small access road. Originally, that was intended to be the full access road, but we took feedback from the planning board. We took a closer look at the traffic pattern and the visibility on that corner and agreed that it's poor. So we then made a revision and moved the primary egress over to the west, which is a much safer location with much better visibility in both directions. Again, we still will need a small access road To the east, it will not allow access or egress all the way back to the site, only to the interconnection equipment. So that'll be a limited installation period and very, very infrequent maintenance, just to check that equipment, again, probably once a year, if that, was the best estimate I could get from the operations team. And then traffic, obviously during construction, the roads will be monitored and made sure that safety and what's it called, Eric, if they're monitoring the roads?
Like a work zone traffic control plan will be put in place.
Yeah, and then during operations to the site, very, very little and infrequent, usage, only for mowing and occasional maintenance on site.
Have you heard anything from the state back about either of the one location or the?
We submitted to them, and they said they would get back to us with comments by next Wednesday. So I had an initial conversation with them, and it's under review.
Yeah, I have another question related. It was brought up in one of the comments about the longevity of the project. In other words, that you have this decommissioning plan, but presumably depending on who owns the property in the future, that decommissioning may not happen. Or is it a set life for the project? So if the owner in 25 years were to decide that they wanted to replace all the panels and continue the project, would that still be the case? And this addresses the fact that, as somebody pointed out, we obviously need to continue having renewable energy. So if we've created this project, then would that possibility exist?
Sure. So that's a great question. I think the short answer is we can't tell. I think for this project today, we're assuming a 25-year project lifetime. I think that the panels also have a 25-year warranty lifetime. We'll check that with the panels we currently have proposed. So I think 25 years from now, I'm not sure. It could be possible there's another owner who wants to come back to the town and renegotiate another pilot agreement and extend the life of the project. It's also possible that the state has hopefully accomplished its renewable energy goals, and there's now an emphasis on decommissioning these projects and restoring as much to ag land as possible because the goals have been met. So I think it could go either way. I think there's a mechanism with the decommissioning bond to reevaluate the value of the bond every couple years to make sure that it would still qualify to cover what the expected cost would be to decommission the site.
Just to follow up on it, what about replacing in 10 years? Presumably the technology is going to be better in 10 years. Would you go through and replace all or some of those panels in 10 or 15 years before the decommissioning plan?
Yeah, I'll say this, the panels are really expensive. They're far and away the most expensive line item on construction of the site. So I think there would probably have to be an incredibly dramatic increase in efficiency for the cost that would have been amortized over only half of the lifetime to then be written off. But again, I'm not sure. I think the way we think about the panels are, the panels themselves they're like tires on a car. You can somewhat easily replace them and put new ones on. I think where it gets more complicated is when you're really increasing the generation capacity of the site. Then you have to think about replacing the inverters. You have to think about going back to the utility. We have an agreement with the utility for our 10 megawatts of energy injection, but if that was ever to be expanded, we would have to go back to the utility and thinking back to that hosting capacity map. If there's no more capacity, then the project size can never be increased.
So with regards to the project size, there's some conflicting information because the Ag data statement from November 2022 states that each installation is 7.6 megawatts, but then the environmental assessment form and your conversation is all about 5 megawatts per site.
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at the sizes, and it really depends on where you are in the industry. So the state really measures it by alternating current, AC. That's what's fed on the grid. So that's like what can be injected onto the grid. And the size is usually a bit larger for direct current, so the DC generation, somewhere in a ratio of like 1.1 to 1.3, maybe 1.4. I think currently, as is, it's 7.2 DC to every 5 AC. But the kind of bottom line number of how productive the site will be is measured in AC. It fluctuates less, so we tend to stick with the AC numbers.
How many panels are involved?
Yeah, do you know that number?
I do have it.
24,000.
Yeah, it's a few thousand.
We'll pull that, if you can give me a second.
Yeah, so each system will have approximately 12,000 panels.
24,000.
Yeah, so plus or minus. Yeah, I think the one we have right now is 11,904 for the one to the west, and then the one to the east is 12,288.
So that's for the whole project or one site? 5
Yeah. Yeah, so what he's saying is that it's 12,000 on each side of the project, so 24,000 total. And you look at these numbers, I mean, they sound huge, and then you look at what the state goal is 10 gigawatts. And if you do the math, you're talking about 24 million pounds across the state, and 1,000 of these sites. So how many towns are there in the state? So, they're gonna be all over.
How many containers is that from China? 40 foot and 30 foot?
What, containers?
Yeah, the panels come in containers.
Oh, all right, let's, any board members have anything further? What's that?
I know a couple people.
Oh, well, we have another list. We're gonna have a second trench of,
Can we take a 5-minute break?
you want to 5 minutes? Okay. All right, let's take a 5 minute. We only have 4 names on here. You really want to? What?
Let's go. Yeah, let's.
All right, so Leanne Fremar, if you're not on the list to speak a second time, come see me.
I just have a question for the board, if that's
Yes,
allowed.
just speak up if you're not going to use the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry, would you like to?
Please. It's also so we can capture it on the video.
Back to my fear of public speaking.
That's how you get over it.
Looks like it sure is. I have a question for the board.
Yes.
Based on the numbers that we saw quickly flashed on the screen, it looks like the town would be in line to benefit from $1 million from this project over a 20-year period. Have you considered any other ways to raise $50,000 a year for the next 20 years to prevent this project?
Well, again, we're not going to get in a dialogue, but I'll just say that the pilot program and the taxes involved are negotiating, nothing to do with us. That, I mean, we can consider it, but he has to negotiate with the town board, the county, and the school district. And so we look at what, we consider that in our decision, the benefits to the town, but it's nothing we have any control of.
Have you done any assessments of the property value depreciation that you would inflict on the people who own properties that are directly adjacent to and stare directly onto this development?
Well, it's a point to be, we're taking in all the information now today.
And how will those findings be communicated to the community? And will we be given more time than a month's notice to be able to prepare further questions and investigations into those answers?
We're going to go over that at the end of this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Varden, good time?
Guys, thank you for hosting the hearing today. I think it's very informative, and just given the timeline that some of the folks here today called out as being a little alarming, we do appreciate the chance to learn more about this project, because it did feel a little bit troubling, the amount of time that was really given to really learn anything at all about it, even with the initial December notice. The real questions I have are really just around how much consideration we have really done, and really where some of our motivations are as a community. Of course, you guys are public servants, around what's to be done for the best of the community. You've quoted some really meaningful numbers as state goals, but the local community is really the first order of service here. And it's important, I think, for us to really be heard as a community as it relates to what we really want in our homes, right, in our backyard and in our spaces. And as our public servants here representing us, we really implore you guys to take this extremely seriously and really act with a tremendous amount of transparency so it feels like we are very united versus at odds or at ends for any reason, because the longevity of these things, again, carry a tremendous amount of unknown risk. Yeah. No, I mean, I know we're near time, but if there are any other ways that you can make this more transparent and make it more of a dialogue, I think it's a great step forward for our community and just in general.
Just keep in mind that this is basically the beginning of the process. As you heard Warren, this is not the, we're not at the end of the road. We're at the middle of the beginning.
I don't know what it looks like, but I definitely commend the fact that this is a beginning, not an end.
Can I make one comment on
Yeah.
For anybody that might be, if you can sit down, thank you, Bart. For anybody that's upset about notice, we have a YouTube page that is updated very regularly. The town page is being updated by the secretary to the supervisor, and we have a Facebook page that is updated. So get involved. That's how most of you are here today, probably. Some of you received letters and didn't have great notice as far as you're concerned. Get involved. We're online very heavily. Okay.
And volunteer. We're all volunteers here, so every year we're looking for members and for different committees, not even just the boards. Jack Macarella.
I just want to hit on like 3 points maybe that.
If you could just hold the mic, and can you tell me who you are and where you
Jack
your
Macarello,
address?
lifelong resident, 394 Schultz Hill Road. Also manage Sugar Hill Farm, which is adjacent to this property. 3 points to think about maybe on this 45 acres, and I think you just said 24,000 panels. When anybody's trying to say you're not going to see any of this, it's kind of hard when you're looking across at a grassy field and not all this shiny glass coming back at you. Some of the points and the words Andrew used is have to really squint to see this. I don't think you're going to have to squint to see that much glass shining back at you from any of those hills that were out in the distance. Second point, the most viewed part of this is going to be from our farm, which the fence is like right on the border of, especially when you start talking about cutting the higher trees down and clearing so trees do not fall on the fence, which would bring it right up to our property line. And it's just kind of funny that all the answers are known about this whole thing, but you ask about the toxicity of the panels and we know nothing about them. It's, he knew every other answer except for that answer, which is kind of funny. Thanks, bye.
I just want to point out that our solar law requires non-reflective panels. They have those coatings, so again, I don't know what that looks like in the wild. Jim Smith, I guess. You going to speak for yourself this time?
No, actually.
Oh, more of John?
Yeah,
Please, letter won't be as long. All right, you all know who I am. So we left off on John's recommendation for a moratorium. Just continue this. He said many issues that come to mind, but not to be troublesome, but only to the point out of the town's needs to protect itself and its new territory. In compassion, the Durst project is easier for citizens to evaluate. In a residential development plan, each of us has a common sense understanding of what is being proposed based on our life experience. And regardless of someone's view of the Durst project, the Durst organization's technical and financial competence are not in question. For solar farms, the caveat emptor here are a few in no particular order. And a few of these have obviously been discussed and answered, but I'm going to read through them anyways. Where exactly will the 6 or 7 foot fence be located? What are the terms upon which a conservation easement over the unused land will be granted, and to which conservancy? Applicants answer, we do this in the construction phase, is not acceptable. Exactly which 20 or 26 acres of forest will be clear cut? The board should require that the town retain an applicant at applicant's expense, a certified forester, many work in the town on the 480 Alpha forestry program, to mark with the applicant which trees are to be cut and which are to be saved, and then have the cutting supervised by the forester. How will applicants' assertion that the panels will not be seen from any house or road be verified? Is CP capable of executing this project? Its website says CP was founded less than 2 years ago. Neither its young CEO or any other employee is listed as civil, electrical, mechanical, or any other type of engineer. Who is the real owner of the project? The Giardinos, Reed Solar, CP. Who is financing this project? On what terms? If CP fails to complete, who is in charge? What can we learn from our neighbors in Copake? Why does the town assessor need to agree now to a methodology to assess this project? And what other applications are on the horizon? We get a letter or call at least monthly from a developer to see if we want to consider a solar project on our north field. How will the CP application affect this? And lastly, how will the town ensure that what gets approved gets built? Drew Reaver is very talented and dedicated, but this requires outside help. The decommissioning proposal in the application makes no sense. Can it be given teeth? And the applicant says New York State is pausing the New York Sun Incentives Program at the end of the year. Why? If New York State is pausing, why shouldn't Pine Plains? What's going on? I don't envy the task ahead for the planning board, but there are a large number of local residents who could be helpful as the town moves forward into this. My opinion, don't rush. When an applicant says this is how it's done in other New York State solar projects, ask again for a better answer. John Farrell.
Michael Goldman.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is it off?
You may have turned it off.
Jim?
That's better. Yeah.
See, Jim turned it off. Call me Michael. I'm on 426 Trip Road. I look across the valley and watch the sunset right over the bridge that supposedly will hide all of those solar panels. In theory, great, renewables, love it. But, you know, it comes down to the specifics, and this is a great, in my mind, beginning. I hope this is the beginning, because I just heard about it by accident from a neighbor. I'm, 501 feet away, so I didn't get any information. The cutting of the trees, to me, is really, really a big deal. I think it does have to be monitored. We can't just say, here's a little line at a 1 to 500 scale where we're going to cut them. I think, we need some kind of proper representation to be out there to mark each and every tree to make sure that's the extent of what they're doing. I had a terrible experience 3 years ago with Central Hudson coming through my line saying they were going to top off, 400 feet of trees. They cut them all down. I planted them myself about 25 years ago. I waited until they were this beautiful height, and then they just cut them down and left them there. It took me 6 months to get them to clean it up. So we want to make sure that every single tree is agreed to. The other thing, the idea of planting trees, I might look young, but I ain't going to be here when they're tall enough. And 25 years of solar panels, by the time the panels are being replaced or thrown away, those trees will finally be high enough to hide them. So that doesn't wash. I think that should be taken out. I have just a few other miscellaneous things because I took copious notes. I think the idea of tax benefits is great. What is it, 20 years, $1 million? I don't know how they arrived at that. I have no idea, so that does need to be explained further. The idea of being a certain distance to a substation in order to be able to do something like this, I'd like to know what that means, and that leads to a broader question. I think the notion of precedence, it really is important to me. I thought it was a very vague answer. I think we need to drill down on that and understand if this goes through, what does that mean down the road? Because even if this is perfect and we can't see it and it works just as they planned, what happens in the future? I couldn't tell those little blue lines what they meant. I think we need to understand that. Are there currently in the pipeline more plans already? So I think we need to look into that.
Thank you, Mike.
So, thanks. I was going to sing a song.
Vitani.
Thank you for giving me the extra 3 minutes, which is great. First of all, I want to make clear to the board that we really appreciate what you're doing for us as a whole. I know this is a tough job for you, and there's no right or wrong decisions at this particular one meeting. This is going to be an ongoing process, but there are a lot of issues which are kind of correlated with today's questions and answers. Question number one, 24,000 panels is a huge amount of panels. That means we are looking at a constant run of 40-foot containers coming to the site on and off for a very long period of time. Question number two, if the panels are coming from China, there is no guarantee that they will arrive at this destination within a time period this project is specified for. We have to look at all these things. Question number four, is Carson willing to try and use American-made products as opposed to Chinese products at this point in time? Question number five, does anybody ever have done a cost-benefit analysis in terms of disposing these panels? Right now, there is practically very little recycling. It costs $20 to $30 to recycle a panel, as opposed to putting it in a landfill, which is just about $2 a panel. Has somebody looked at all these aspects? And who knows, maybe the technology. We are looking at, in the New York State, we don't have any coal plants, we don't have any other plants which produce electricity. Natural gas is, I think, much better than plants in China or India or Vietnam, where gas is, of course, scarce and coal is abundantly available. I think we should look at other technologies, maybe wind, maybe something else. I'm not averse to it. I think the board should also consider getting some more proposals from some other companies to see what is what. The background of the Carson people should be completely investigated in terms of, how many projects have they done, how many have been successful, what is the timeline, when were they put in, what is happening. There are a lot of questions. These panels do need to be changed to get the maximum output of AC electricity. It is a fallacy that they say 25 years. I don't think so. The life of a panel, in my opinion, is approximately between 8 and 10 years. There's a lot of weather vagaries in this area. There's a lot of issues with the vegetation. It crops up very quickly in our land. It does not take 6 months for the vegetation to come back. I have to trim my property every 6 weeks.
I just have a couple of comments. Did it go off?
On.
Now it's on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the bats, has anybody marked how many shagbark hickory trees there are on the property? The bats tend to nest, the bark kind of halfway peels away. That's the tree that they utilize for nesting the most. So that would be important to identify. And the other thing that occurred to me, is the company aware that we have black bears here? Black bears come through our property, not frequently, but we have to bring in our bird feeder every night, for instance, because they take them down to the ground if we leave them out. So I hope that your fence is bear-proof. Sorry.
Now we turn it over.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is it last chance? Anyone else want to talk?
So I just quick question on the fence, because at the hearing in December, you mentioned a chain link fence, but then today you showed a fence which was a different fence. So I'm just curious, what is the fence proposal?
Yeah, so I think I was mistaken previously. I thought we had a chain link in our design, but we actually have the agricultural fence with the wood posts and then the crosshatch. I think it's black wire. That's what's in the plans. I was mistaken when I mentioned the chain link fence.
Okay, because the photograph, I think, showed barbed wire. A barbed wire.
No, the one with the bee boxes.
Yeah.
That was not barbed wire. I don't believe it was barbed wire. We're not proposing barbed wire.
So you're talking about the cross.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's
Metal?
Wire mesh. Yeah, like a 4x4 wire mesh.
Okay, so have you given any consideration to impact on migration of any animals through that kind of fenced area? How would that impact
Yeah, I mean,
wildlife?
yeah, so we would leave a gap at the bottom, so small wildlife can move under it and throughout the array area, but it would keep out larger wildlife like deer and things like that.
Okay, because there are also bobcat in the area, and other larger animals, coyotes that wouldn't be able to get through a fence like that, or maybe a coyote.
Yeah, maybe they might get under it, but probably not. Nothing very large.
And what about like visibility, like you put like things on it so they don't run into, I don't know, the deer, right? Like go smashing into the damn thing. No?
Yeah, I don't think so. You can see it, yeah. Yeah, it's visible.
Anyone else on the board?
Actually, can we ask one question?
All right, go ahead. Who are you? Oh.
So, forgive me as well, I'll make a preamble about being a bad public speaker. My name is Eric Gallagher, my wife here, Allison Gallagher. We live at 387 Skunks Missouri Road, which, as Andrew pointed out, is the White House that he pointed out as specifically being able to see this project. So, I understand that as we move kind of humanity towards some renewable projects, there will be some sacrificial lambs. And I can't say with a straight face up here that I want my view to be preserved, and at the expense of that be continued reliance on fossil fuels. That being said, I want to echo my neighbors, most of my neighbors' opposition to this project immediately at face value as presented today. I think there are really some valid concerns. I think the feeling that we are having is that a lot of this information was presented to us when this project was all but seemingly already mostly pushed through. So I find that kind of threatening and a little bit suspicious. I also want to point out that probably the sense of urgency that you're getting pushed with this project has a lot to do that if the state and federal benefits and tax benefits are to pause at the end of the year, an actor like Carson Power will most likely cease to exist when those incentives and those subsidies go away. So I want to echo the suspicions about their history, how long they've been at this, what projects they've been behind. I'd like to also echo the concerns of our fellow communities like Copake in opposing projects like this by these kind of like fly-by-night actors. And I want to really challenge the board to think about who we are as a community, what we want in our communities and what we stand for. I know that my wife and I moved here for the very reason that this is a quiet agricultural community. And again, I understand the need for renewable power projects moving forward. But I do believe that that is probably most effectively accomplished at the user level by allowing residents to continue putting solar power on their homes as opposed to a large project like this. Just as I was opposed a natural gas product or power plant being put in the same site. So I think that's just where I want to end it. I'd like to echo my neighbors' opposition for this. I'd like to also echo their skepticism about the rate at which this project is moving, how the information was presented to us, the late notice. I think that's all I can think of. Did I miss anything?
I want to point out the notice that you received. I actually went, after we did that walk around, we saw your house, tried to figure out who it was, drove around, and then I had my secretary notice everyone up on that ridge. It was actually outside his statutory requirements.
Yeah, I understand that. And I can only respond by saying I don't look at YouTube. I don't have a Facebook account. So while it's great that you guys are online, you're disseminating information online. This project was first mentioned in the Franklin Herald like last month, if not 3 or 4 weeks ago. So because this isn't, some people have expressed their concerns with things being in the view line. This will very much be my view line now. When you walk out onto my back patio, house we built in the last 5 years, having made a very conscious choice to come to this community and build in that spot because of that view line. Again, I don't want to say to the community, don't build a solar plant because it ruins my view. I mean, what a horrible thing to say. However, I don't feel like I have a choice right now, and I find that to be very disturbing. So I just want, again, the gentleman's point that I will be probably retired and long gone to Florida by the time the trees will be tall enough to prevent me viewing that site. I find that to be a very valid point, that we're being, the community is being enticed with promises of money and fitting into the state government's view of renewable energy products. It's just happening too fast, and I think we're falling for it. I'm a Gen Xer, so a pop culture reference, I feel like we're Springfield being sold the monorail right now, and that we need to pump the brakes on it. I'll take up no more of your time.
Okay, so anyone else? No. All right, anyone from the board have anything? All right, so this is what I want to do. I want to keep this public hearing open. I also want to schedule, because this has been so much fun, we're going to do it on the 18th of February, same time. As long as it's available, I believe. I don't know, we'll have to check if it's available, but it likely will be, especially if someone can go somewhere else. 18th of February, Saturday. Do I have to do we have to have a motion for a special meeting and public hearing on the 18th of February?
Motion.
11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so schedule. And that's it. All right, we're